Pulse is a Japanese horror film that came out in 2001 that's written and directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. So, Pulse was this week's Patreon poll winner, and this is a film that has been on my radar for such a long time. I put it on many different polls before this, but it would just always slightly get beaten out by another film, and this time it won by 2 votes, so it barely edged it out, and I was really excited about that fact. This is a film that I've heard about, honestly, since I was in middle school. And I think that's just because of the fact that the American remake was pretty popular here in America when it came out, that it really didn't take long for me to learn that it was a remake of an original Japanese horror film, which is obviously the one I saw, because the vast majority of people say that it's 10 times better, which is not a surprise to anybody. But I've actually heard some positive things about the remake. I've heard as far as remakes go, it's really not that terrible. But again, that's kind of a low bar when it comes to remaking foreign horror films. But anyway, I knew that this was a film that most people really like or love. And I hear it's essentially a must-see in terms of not only Japanese horror, but just horror in general. And I've even had some people describe to me that this is one of the most scariest and most unsettling horror films that they've ever seen in their entire life. So with all that being said, I have to say that I was actually quite disappointed and underwhelmed by this film. And that's not to say that there aren't positive things about this. Honestly, there are a few things about this film that I think are great. And even though I was disappointed and I honestly didn't really even like it that much, I can definitely understand why somebody would say that this is one of the scariest experiences that they've ever had watching a horror film. And that's just because of the fact that the actual horror sequences themselves, the way that this film captures and embodies horror, is mostly effective. I would say the majority of the horror sequences in this film are actually effective and are by far the best aspect of this film. And there's one scene in particular that is honestly one of the most bone-chilling and unsettling sequences that I've ever seen in a horror film. It's actually this screenshot of the scene that I have right behind me, and honestly, just looking at it is kind of making me feel weird and creeping me out, and I kind of regret putting that as my wallpaper. But that scene is just so off-putting and unsettling with how it goes about portraying its suspense. Just how the filmmaker utilizes darkness in that scene, and how he understands which abnormalities really put people off is what makes that scene so effective. It's not even just that scene alone. There are many other scenes in this film in terms of the horror that I think are quite effective in terms of how he utilizes sound design. There are sequences where voices are being captured in a really creepy way, and the way that he's able to incorporate the levels of volume in certain scenes is genuinely effective in terms of the horror approach and really making you feel unsettled. And it's not just a sound design either. I'd actually say the most impressive aspect of this film in terms of how the horror is captured is the camera work and the direction of the camera work. Just even beyond how well framed a lot of the sequences are, it's the way that the director moves the camera through certain sequences that really maintain suspense in an interesting way, or through a more simpler approach by having a horror sequence where the camera remains stationary and you have this kind of slow moving and slow burn scene that takes its time, but with every second you just feel completely on edge. And again, it's through the direction of the camera work, the direction in general, to the sound design, makes it to where this film doesn't rely on jump scares to give you that kind of thrill that a lot of horror fans want. And that's certainly the biggest compliment I can give this film. Because when it comes to the horror, I think it works very well. Almost everything else just didn't do it for me. And, that's a real shame because, again, the horror works very well. It's just that this is a 2-hour film where the characters feel really underdeveloped and the story just tries to reach too far, and it turns what was a simple, smaller scoped story and stretches it out into something that's gigantic and apocalyptic. And to me, that not only does that take away from the kind of condensed and isolated horror that you got before, but even the execution of the larger scale event that this film goes for just really wasn't there. It feels really over the top and cheesy. And I mean, there's even a plane crash sequence in the third act that I was kind of baffled that they went for. And I understand that it's 2001, so, you know, the effects aren't going to be all that convincing. But it just seems like the filmmaker was being way too ambitious and kind of squandered the simplicity that was really working for the film. But even beyond that, the score is kind of a mixed bag, because there are aspects of this film where the score is actually quite effective. In terms of not only the style of it, because in terms of the style of the score, there are moments where it does the kind of, at least what most people would recognize from a Tarantino film, where the score just kind of abruptly cuts as the next scene transitions. And, you know, that's actually fine. I didn't really have a problem with that. But the problem I had with the score is that in many times of this film, it was just way over the top and just too dramatic. And, I mean, even times where the scene wants you to feel emotion between characters in a situation, the score is just really overbearing and really trying to make you feel something out of the situation, even though you really know nothing about these characters. These characters aren't really fleshed out in any way. And the dialogue in this film really wasn't all that great either. A lot of the dialogue is really expositional, and a lot of it really doesn't seem like it's coming genuinely from a character. It feels like it's really just there to make sure the audience understands certain plot points and certain character details. And it gets really annoying after a while, because there are scenes where you can tell that the filmmaker was trying to get us to understand a character more, but instead it felt like it was kind of spoon-feeding themes of the film that has to do with existential dread, that has to do with the anxieties of the rise of the internet era, that has to do with loneliness. And instead of like expressing these things in a fleshed out way, instead you kind of just have characters, you know, say these things through its dialogue. And to me, it just didn't work for the most part, unfortunately. And I really don't want to understate the fact that this film really does feel like it's 20 to 30 minutes too long. And I mean, we get like a few good horror scenes in the third act, especially within the last 10 minutes of the movie. We get one particularly decent horror sequence. But by the time that we even get to that point, I already felt kind of checked out and just really wanted this film to wrap up. And the ending music choice as this film transitions into its ending credits, I don't understand the choice. It feels tone deaf. And like, I don't know why I decided to choose with this kind of upbeat Japanese pop rock music. I mean, perhaps it was going for like a sense of irony, but to me, it just really takes you out. And I get that it's like the ending credits and it's not that big of a deal, but it just felt really silly and completely unnecessary. But again, I do want to make sure that everybody knows that the horror aspect of this film mostly work very well and does contain a few sequences that are genuinely bone-chilling. It's just a shame that we only get maybe 25 to 30 minutes of genuine effective horror in a 2-hour movie that's mostly ineffective. So I'll give Pulse a soft 5 out of 10. Unfortunately, this film just didn't really do it for me, and I understand that it's a hot take baby cake. But as always, I would really love to hear everybody's thoughts on this film. I'm sure there's a good handful of you watching right now that have already seen the film, so if you've already seen it, comment down below and let me know your thoughts on it, whether you liked or disliked it. But that's all I got to say about Pulse. If you really enjoy what I had to say about the film, please give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.